Changes are a constant part of our everyday lives. We have to constantly change. We have to improve, innovate, learn, grow, and learn. But more importantly, we have to share that knowledge and help others grow and improve. If we don't make changes, or at least inspire others to make changes and embrace changes, nothing is going to change. Whether it is in the processes of your work, your practices, or just your attitude, you must demonstrate an ability and willingness to change. At one point or another, we have all used the phrase that insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over but expecting a different result. Change and innovation can be considered the link between sane and insanity.
According to Webster's dictionary, the definition of change is to make different in some particular way, as to alter, to make radically different, as to transform, or to give a different position or course or direction to.
New is change. When selling a product or service that will bring about something new, never ever discount how hard it would be to convince someone to give it a try. How hard it would be to implement the change, and how hard it would be to make sure the change takes roots and flourishes. Technology is changing so rapidly for organizations, and the ability to adopt new technologies is becoming a vital mechanism. Technology has also changed the face and the pace of how we do business. Business processes have been modified, and organizations are now working much more efficiently than ever. The rapid rate of technology has caused heartburn for some individuals who are resistant to change. In this presentation, we're going to get responses from people who are part of organizations and have gone through organizational change. So let's take it to Woman on the Street.
Here are the questions that we're going to be asking our participants. What kind of change have you experienced in an organization? In what way did the leaders in your organization prepare you for the change? How was the change communicated to the organization? Was it communicated suddenly, or was it carefully planned communication? Was there buy-in from the organization's employees? Explain how you felt during the change. Describe your feelings after the change. And what one thing would you do differently if you were leading the change?
So, what kind of change have you experienced in an organization?
Most recently, and personally, job duties.
What kind of change have you experienced in an organization?
Well, the biggest change noticeable here is the turnover in the workforce. People leave at a rapid pace. Some of them retire, some go to other agencies. Mostly the ones that go to other agencies are other social service agencies.
Okay.
The change I've experienced in a new organization is a new system being implemented to convert all systems into one. That's the most recent change in my organization that we've had.
What kind of change have you experienced in an organization?
A change that I incurred personally at my local employment is I had extra duties assigned to me, and that was taking over an additional unit, which that included the front desk.
Major challenges that I experienced was a change in structure and leadership. And during that time, there were several things that were done in regards to it that I would have done differently.
That I have experienced is the financial situation within the city.
In what way did the leaders in your organization prepare you for the change?
They provided minimal trainings that were required by the state. They did have a meeting right before the change
How was the change communicated to the organization?
Suddenly.
When the decision came down from leadership to put me over the front desk, I was notified a week or two prior to that change taking place, and within that 2 week time frame, I was coached by my manager with different tasks as to how we as an agency can move forward and become a better organization.
Suddenly.
Stakeholder buy-ins is critical to the success of an organization to change. This process is not always easy. People are creatures of habit. Most people hate change. Let's see what our interviewees had to say about organizational buy-in during their identified change. Was there buy-in from the organization's employees?
No.
Was there buy-in from the workers? A little, yes, they were. In the beginning, some of the workers were very apprehensive to the change, but as time went on, they gravitated and they appreciated the change and was more welcoming of the change once it took place, and they were actually grateful at the end.
Absolutely not. There was no time for buy-in. There were no questions about buy-in. It was like dictatorship. This is what you're going to do, and that's it.
Explain how you felt during the change.
Oh my goodness, I felt lost because I had no idea. I went from one program to now 4. The expectations to memorize and learn 4 different policies, intense programs and their policies. Suddenly, I felt bewildered. I felt traumatized and definitely overwhelmed and hurt. I think most importantly, I was the trauma of it, and then just feeling hurt because I didn't get answers to why was all of this happening suddenly.
Explain your feelings after the change.
Well, actually, the change is still happening. I'm still in the process of learning, training, learning. Again, there were 4 other intense programs that I now have to learn policy for each program. So the change is not finished because it's changing all the time. Is that I'm not comfortable with those changes suddenly, and then sometimes the training does not prepare you for the upcoming changes that we have to go through. So the change is still happening, and I still feel the same way. So the feelings have not changed. The only thing that has changed is my mentality, and I'm trying to cope with the changes and coming up with my own reasons for it. That I have to be a team player. Number one, there's some other reasons that are hiding. What my feelings might be at the moment that I have to just adapt and adjust to. Trying to adapt and adjust, but it's hard to adapt and adjust to craziness, stuff that just doesn't make sense to me. So, but the change is still going on. Nothing has really changed as far as my feelings. It's constantly changing because I'm learning.
Describe your feelings after the change.
Disappointed in the leadership within the city. They allowed the city to get behind in their bills and cause financial stress, and also about my job security.
After the change started, there were a number of employees that were concerned because they didn't feel a part of the change, because they did not have input in the change that would affect them directly.
What one thing would you do differently if you were leading the change?
The thing that I would have done differently once making that change was to make sure that I had adequate staff in order to make sure that the transition went smoothly.
What one thing would you do differently if you were leading the change?
Well, I would do my best to be very aware of the morale of my people, of their feelings, of their situations. I'd take time to spend with them, see how they're doing, ask them for their input, ideas, and suggestions, and really consider them. Let them know they're very important. It's not just me, it's not just the upper management. Everybody on board should count. Their voice should count. I would implement any changes I could that would be positive and encouraging. And I have done that over the years for my supervisors and coworkers where I've worked, and it's always made a difference, a positive, encouraging impact.
What one thing would you do differently if you were leading the change?
I think one thing, I can't just answer that question with just one thing that I would do. I think the top priority would be given the reason for the change. At least this is why this is happening, and we would ask you to at least join us in making this change. I think there has to be some type of buy-in from the employee in order to make it happen. If I knew the reason for it, and if I understood the reason for it, and the reason made sense, then of course there was buy-in, and then that could eliminate some of the stress, the hurt, the trauma, all of that. But at least have the employees buy into the change, and then I would have them sit down, and would be a meeting. This is why we're doing this, and this is the process for us to get this change done. There has to be a reason, and then there has to be a logical process as to how it's going to be done. There has to be some structure to change. It shouldn't be haphazardly, are we going to change in what? Is there a process to this change, for this change? And then if it is, then I need to know what it is so that I can at least buy in. I'm not, a difficult person to get along with, even with the feelings and whatnot, but that should have been a better way to present it. I think the presentation, I guess that would be the top answer. How I would present it to an employee is very important, and I would add structure to it as well. And this is how we're going to, as a team, get this change done in a logical manner.
If I was leading the change, the difference I would have is more input from the employees who's doing the job daily. I feel that the more input you have from them, the better that you'll be prepared to fix any glitches that may arrive at that time. And they will have more knowledge of that, being that they do work in the system on a daily basis. So that's my input.
Of course, with transition, there's never a perfect way that it can be done. However, I can honestly say, if I would have been a part of the transition, I would have been sure to include everyone, especially the ones that were affected. I also would continue with meeting regularly in preparation for the change, as well as during and after change, just to make sure that everyone is on one accord. If by chance that there was not everyone on one accord, we would sit down and regroup on some things that could be done differently. One thing that I do like about change is if it doesn't work, it's something you can always go back to what you originally did.
Okay, I've heard you mention trauma several times during this interview. Could you tell me a little bit about organizational trauma?
I think I can explain it to you. Organizational trauma is when there are changes that, just as I described earlier, taking place in an organization, and it has no rhyme or reason, it has no structure to it. It's just changes, and there's no logic to it. There are changes in policy, changes in employees, changes in leadership, all of that. And if that happens over a long period of time, and then the organization does not provide time for healing, time for employees to even adjust to the multiple changes, when you have multiple layers of trauma, healing has to take place. If not, that trauma is going to spill over not into how you perform your job, but how you even look at yourself as a human being. But it also goes into your home life, your recreational life, all of that. Because what I hear from other employees, you're going to do three things with trauma. You're going to either freeze, you're going to run away from it, or either you're going to fight it. And a lot of employees, they left. So they ran away from it. It's like, I'm not dealing with this. This is too much. Some employees try to hang in there and stay because of the team. Take one for the team. You know, they don't have a lot left. So how can I help with this? Could still try to deal with this team. And what happens is a type of freezing takes place, and employees start not doing their job as efficiently or proficiently as they can. They freeze. They're in a freeze mode. I'm overwhelmed. I can't handle this. I can't do this. But they still try to do it, but it can't be done because they're in the freeze mode. And then some people just fight. They just fight everything: policy, leadership, everything. So there are three responses to trauma. And if that trauma is not healed, if it's not identified, if it's not recognized, it's going to spill over into productivity, and it demoralizes the employees within the organization.
Okay, I'm ready.
In my organization, we talk about trauma-informed care as it relates to the children and the families that we serve. And last year, 2016, in reviewing some of the information on child abuse and neglect, I discovered this article from the Virginia Coalition of Child Abuse Prevention, 2016, on organizational trauma. And I really didn't think that there was organizational trauma. I just talked about trauma with children and families. But when they talked about organizational trauma, I said it's the same thing. It does talk about the work environments are not immune to trauma and the toxic environment it can produce. It does give some preventive measures for organizational trauma. It says to prevent or heal from trauma, organizational leadership must be transparent, eliminate rumors, and build trust by providing daily, detailed communication about the changes impacting the organization, and most importantly, ask for feedback. Clarify organizational values and goals. That is so important. What are the values and goals of the organization? If the organization suggests that one thing is they value one thing versus another, and we don't see that in the organization, there is no buy-in. It says, be clear about how change will affect workers and their roles and responsibilities. Discuss the goals to foster stability. Number 3, it said you have to empower your employees. Rebuild confidence by involving them in decision making. Set clear, measurable objectives and provide assistance to achieve results. When you tell employees to do this or do that, and you have not provided them with the tools to get it done, then you are not empowering your employees. Simple things to get your job done. Build connections. Provide ways for employees to support each other during a crisis. And in my organizations, there's always a crisis. Again, multiple crises, multiple layers of trauma, and you have no sense of how to heal from all of that, you're going to have disaster. It says, encourage emotional connections throughout the organization. These relationships sustain the workforce during a crisis. There are some people identified in my agency that will provide support to other employees. However, when those key people in the organization are targeted, and then they are exposed again to organizational trauma again and again and again, then where's your support system? There is none. Constantly assess. Know the strengths and weaknesses of the organization and its culture. Understand who are the influencers and thought leaders. Constantly assess. We have to constantly assess what we're doing, how we're doing, and how we're going to get it done. And sometimes, because of the trauma and the crisis, multiple crises, that is left undone. We don't even speak about it. Create a recognition program. Acknowledge and celebrate workers for outstanding performance while creating a positive atmosphere. That is so important. It says for outstanding performance, not performance that leadership think is outstanding. It is true, going back to clarifying organization values and goals. It is true outstanding performance and not somebody's ego. And it says for outstanding performance by creating a positive atmosphere. If you have so-called outstanding performance and you're not creating a positive atmosphere, then you should not be recognized at all. So those are some of the ideas presented in this article on organizational trauma. And once you understand that, you can kind of go through it and try to, in your own way, heal from the trauma. But sometimes we have to self-preserve ourselves. And in order to do that, we may have to leave the organization.
Change is the way we grow, the way we develop, the way we move ahead. It's just not easy. People tend to want to stay in a comfort zone because they are afraid. Resistance to change is monumental, especially within organizations where people have done the same thing for so many years. Ron Atwood said it best. As leaders, we can't force innovation and change. If people haven't been in innovation in a while, then there may be a lot of resistance during a change. Let's face it, rarely are stakeholders thrilled at the prospect of change. Change requires work for all participants, from planning through implementation and evaluation.